Top 5 ways to get better at Yu-Gi-Oh. Why did I bookmark this? Wait, hold on. I don't need this video. What do I need this video for? This isn't important. I don't need this one. Are you sure? Let me see. Does he have a Metafy link? Improve your Yu-Gi-Oh fundamentals today. Metafy. God damn it, Pac. God, no, it's a Metafy video. It's a Metafy video. Okay, let's watch it anyway.
Welcome back to the
He'll give us some
Today
freebie
we're going to
pointers.
be going over the top 5 ways to actually improve at Yu-Gi-Oh. So I want to be a little bit more specific about what exactly I mean by this. Things I'm going to be talking about is very specific, actionable, things you can maybe take today, apply this week, and hopefully feel a difference. And in fact, I actually wrote a full guide on all of this over in Metafy, where you can check in the description box below, which is improving your Yu-Gi-Oh fundamentals. So if you guys want a complete deep dive, you can check the link in the description box below. And yeah, we can talk more about it at the end. But first, let me show you exactly what's in some of the content there. So as you guys know, I've been playing the game for now about 6 years. And I thought a lot about what separates players who kind of plateau.
Veteran of the game.
Players who are constantly improving, getting better. And so these 5 are sort of my top 5 in terms of how to, get to that next step. So number 5, knowing your rulings. I think this is a pretty interesting one. And it sounds like a boring answer, but just hear me out a bit, right? So
wait, hold on. Was this before or after Jesse's final? May 5th, 2026. I'm just saying, if Jesse Cotton watched the Pac How to Get Better at Yu-Gi-Oh video, he might have been onto something, right? Every format, there's like a couple of very specific interactions and stuff that people obviously should learn. I can't think of anything like very specific semi-recently, but gosh, I mean, we've had so many like crazy examples historically, right? Like understanding the difference between like resolving a card effect and activating a card effect, right? Like when Mirror Jade destroys in the end phase, when Destroy Phoenix Enforcer returns, the amount of people that would like try Called by the Grave, Destroy Phoenix Enforcer in the standby phase when like it doesn't start a chain, it's just like things like that, meta to meta, format to format. These little kind of small niche scenarios like that come up for relevant decks. So that's important to know.
I think people genuinely underestimate how much like not knowing like certain rulings basically cost them games, matches that they basically should have won. And this applies like just policy or
one thing I gotta learn that I still actually don't think I have a definitive answer on. If you crown Zoroa, does it keep the equip? I think so, right? Does anyone know? And does it change if it's chained? Like Zoroa effect, activate the effect, chain crown. Do you still keep the equip? That's something I actually should like remember. Equips don't care about crown. Okay, noted. Yeah, see, little things like that. Every format, there's like a few minor small things you can incorporate into your deck to make sure you know.
Specific deck interactions or card interactions in general. The thing is,
if it's chained, it won't equip. Wait, really? If it's chained, then it won't equip. Wait, so if I activate Zoroa, and then my opponent chains Valor, or something, and I chain Crown to it, like, will I be able to like equip later with something like Spoon? After the resolution of that? That should still equip, right? You can equip a Crown monster, period. Okay. Yeah.
Really need to know every single interaction in the game. Honestly, that's not really realistic, and it's not necessary to do all of that. What you need to kind of do is understand like the premise of all the rulings, so that regardless of the interactions, like how cards work. And what I mean by this is like, instead of trying to memorize like this specific interaction of like A, B, and C, it's like you understand the premise for why it's ruled a certain way. And if you understand the premise, then you can apply that to other cards. And instead of, and in that way you can be up to date, right? And that basically allows you to have a stronger foundation or fundamentals, so that when you get approached with other scenarios related to something similar, you're able to best tackle that. So, and basically what happens is when you don't know your rulings, however, when you're at a tournament, a situation comes up, you and your opponent argue about something, you call the judge, sometimes the judge is not perfect. They might rule incorrectly, and you might not appeal as a result because you just trust the judge, which is completely fair. But if you are more confident and you know exactly how it should be ruled, you can more likely to appeal, which intel allows you to maybe win a game you're supposed to win because based off
People are very afraid of calling a judge, by the way.
Sometimes
I think people liken it to like calling the police and snitching, but at a real tournament, you shouldn't feel that way. Just saying, you're allowed to call a judge. You're allowed to get a second opinion from the head judge and appeal. So don't feel too bad. Don't feel like you're upsetting your opponent. Obviously you're a bitch if you call a judge against me and rule against me, but in general, don't worry about it.
You do a play as well where you thought something works a certain way, and as a result, you give your opponent a free window, you burn your resources, or sometimes it just costs you the game completely, and obviously you can't really take it back in a tournament setting. So I think this fix is genuinely easy. So before you sit down for your next event, or as you play more and more, you should understand the premise of the ruling rather than trying to memorize interactions, right? I think memorizing interactions is what causes people to get confused, or they misappropriately, use a certain interaction that they memorize and apply it incorrectly, right? So understanding the premise of knowing your rulings is going to be key, and so that's why it's on my number 5 on the list.
If anyone doesn't understand what that means, understanding the premise of a ruling versus the specific interaction is important, right? So like going off the Zoroa example I gave earlier, rather than trying to memorize, this exact thing happens with these cards, with equips and unaffected monsters, therefore it must be true in every other case and example, right? So by extrapolation generally is not a good thing to do when you're trying to know and remember rulings. It's better to understand the fundamental of like the PSET, etc., rather than trying to extrapolate. Because a big problem that a lot of people do is, it works like this with this interaction, therefore it must work like this in every other interaction, which, isn't always true because there's going to be minor differences. So don't memorize the specific interaction. Try and learn the actual, crux of the rule there and why it works like that.
Number 4 is in terms of how to actually build a deck, right? Like the deck building fundamentals. I think most people...
My hot take for the average player, deck building is completely pointless and unimportant. You will find more success spending more time learning technical play and getting good and practicing and doing mirrors and playing against all the top decks of the meta than trying to reinvent the wheel and trying to come up with a better deck list than the hive mind. Deck building is the most fun part though. Yeah, obviously people play for different reasons, but I'm talking purely from a trying to gain competitive success perspective. It's better to just try and get better from a technical perspective than trying to come up with something new and crazy that no one has ever seen before. Because the chances of that actually being possible applies to very few people. So, but again, people play for different reasons. If you simply enjoy the deck building process, by all means, no one's trying to tell you how to spend your time or not spend your time. I'm just saying, if you purely are only interested in getting more results, it's better time spent practicing than trying to deck build.
What they do is they copy off a list from a tournament result or something, and they just call it a day, maybe make some few changes. But I think as a starting point, I think that's actually fine. I think that's actually solid. And you're not always going to need to reinvent the wheel every format, right? Like Dracotail was pretty much the same deck across.
Hey, look, see.
The format.
You just said it.
Dracotail Brandon literally didn't really change that much at all. But I think if you want to develop yourself as a player, you're gonna need to go beyond being dependent on what someone on what someone else is doing well with, and rather try to understand at the end of the day the rationale for how their deck is built, right? So the explanation on how they built their deck is more important than what their deck looks like, right? So and you have to understand, kind of break down, okay, does their explanation for why the cards they're playing in the deck actually make sense? And so and the reason to understand all of that is that as you get into the minds of how people build their decks, like how the top player builds their deck, why does it look the way it does? Why is their card in that deck versus X, Y, and Z? You get to basically develop a better understanding of rationale. And then when it comes to building your own decks, you can then start applying some of your own thoughts. You combine with what you've learned, and then you're able to have a more cohesive deck, in my opinion.
And just for TCG players, by the way, a further point that is not mentioned at all, or not talked about anywhere near as much. Learning side patterns is extremely important. The amount of times that you sit down in front of your opponent in the middle of a tournament, in the middle of a round, and then you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I'm going second into Doom Z. what do I side deck? And then you're sitting there looking through your side deck and you're like, shit, I actually don't have like a card for card specific plan of this comes out for this comes out for this comes out for this if I'm going against X matchup under first or second. That's just something you gotta just spreadsheet out and memorize before you go to a tournament. You know, you will do yourself like massive favors to understand that and memorize that.
And deck building is a skill, like any skill that it can be developed. It's just that a lot of people really don't get to flex a deck building muscle because a lot of people really do just, you know, take a list off of tournament results or whatever.
You know what's really funny, by the way? I don't watch that many TCG profiles, but, you know, once in a while we'll do like a YCS recap stream or whatever, watch some deck profiles. Very few, like less than single-digit percentage of people, like less than 10% of the people who do the deck profiles, top players. They'll show you the side deck, but they won't tell you this for this, this for this, this for this, this for this, for this matchup, for going first or second. I mean, it would probably take up most of the video if they were to sit and talk about that, for example, I guess. So maybe just for time's sake, people don't go into those details. But general deck profiles post-events, like, people just don't tell you that. Like, they, you know, it's on Metafy. But that, genuinely, that's a really important thing to remember. I always like to give this example, right? Mathematically, statistically, in the TCG, at least, bare minimum, even if you get 2-0'd every single round, 50% of your matchups are played with a side deck, right? And people don't take the time and effort to learn what cards come in and out of their deck. Think about that. Minimum half of your games are side decked. So it's really important to remember, like, to know which cards go in and out, etc.
And I would argue that, like, sometimes the tournament result isn't even an end all be all.
Is it okay to save siding patterns on my phone?
You can still improve on a lot of people's deck lists.
No.
And so I think that's kind of like where I would say
can't do that.
The way you best want to learn how to build a deck is to kind of like pick a deck apart and then try to figure out what's wrong with it, or like why does this not make sense, right? Like, you know, if your opponent expects a lot of Draco Tail, why are they maining Droll, right? If 80% of the room they're expecting is to be playing Draco Tail, why is Droll in their main deck? So that's kind of like the questioning,
don't want you
the
to
inquiry that I'm kind of talking about, is that you have to kind of
activation.
like be willing to question, critically think about cards in your deck, and instead of just kind of putting cards at random. Also, side decking, guys, should be built last. I see a lot of people too focused on like trying to like how do I build a side, like how do I side, all that stuff. It's like you got to build your main deck first before building the side deck, or else the side deck doesn't actually make sense. I also think having a pattern in terms of like how cards go in and out for every matchup and making a list of that also helps your win rate a lot. Because a lot of people kind of like just throw cards that are good. Like
the numbers,
I was throwing 3 Fua at my side. I was throwing 3 Pirelli. I was just throwing 3 Lightning Storm, Duster. Like cards that are like high value but doesn't make sense in the context of in the scheme of how your deck functions, right? For instance, I'll give you a good example with Phoenix with Yummy. It was a deck that didn't play Fua, didn't really play. Maybe some people played Pirelli, but didn't really play.
Jesse famously wings it. Okay, but that is not a fair comparison, right? Like, yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo can show up to a 5-a-side at your locals without training or practice or whatever, right? The average person would probably want to do some stretches or something. I don't know where I was going with that analogy, but like, it's a very niche case to name the literal best player on the planet as like, he's kind of wings it. I didn't know my side patterns at Columbus. Yeah, Ray, but that's because, well, maybe if you did, you would have beat Jesse. Sorry, that was too soon. Is that too soon? Sorry.
Because it was a deck that the game plan was to full stop its opponent through hand traps, through non-engine. So it didn't make sense to side a card like Fua, because if you're trying to full stop your opponent, you're probably not really going to get draws off Fua. So instead of siding Fua, you're going to side more ways to full stop your opponent, right? So that's an example where like your side deck needs to match the game plan of your main deck, or else, you know, like, you know, where typically you would side Fuas, you wouldn't do it here, right? So, and I think once you develop that deck building skill along with like your side decks and stuff, I think that's going to help you compete and do a lot better.
Unironically, by the way, like if you just spend like 10 minutes just literally just going into your deck builder and dueling book and just literally just like give yourself a random matchup. Okay, branded going second. What do I need for branded going second? Okay, I will bring in, I don't know, 2 thrust and I take out Drolls or something, right? I probably want like a third card, like so like a target, like a Duster. Maybe because I'm going second, I have 6 cards in hand instead of 5, so I can afford to lose some consistency. So I take out like the Genea, for example, right? So now when I sit down, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I'm just winging it right now. But I'm just like giving an example. Now I know when I sit down at a tournament and I'm going second against Brandon, I don't have to sit there and fan through my deck and scratch my head like, you know, Just taking the time to just literally move the cards around in your side deck and then just like shove, do things like this. Very, very valuable. Just 10 minutes of your time, just very, very useful for the average player.
Second is the information game. So what I mean by this is one of the most underrated skills in Yu-Gi-Oh is being able to understand
Master Duelist.
Information. What I mean by this is your opponent doesn't know your hand, you don't know theirs, and that uncertainty that is key. So what I mean by this is a lot of people sometimes like scoop because they're looking at their hand, they're like, well, if my opponent negates this, I guess I lose. So they scoop before actually doing that play. So what I mean by this is like you have to take advantage of the fact your opponent doesn't actually know your hand. They might actually let that card go or resolve because they don't actually know your hand, So I think that's one key thing that I've learned is that like you have to play or in a way that bluffs cards you have or may not have, and that's gonna be how you're gonna win some games that you're not supposed to win. And it's like very underrated skill in my opinion. I also would say in terms of information is trying to keep track of cards your opponent.
Okay, before he moves on to the next point, how many times have you at locals like played against someone or watched the duel where your opponent will just like get their play stopped or something and they see you activate like one starter card and they just like scoop? It's like, okay, if they're like a high quality best player, definitely never messes up, then yeah, you can probably like maybe scoop at that point if you're short on time and you think that time is going to be a factor in your match. But the amount of people that will just like get certain cards on their board outed and then just leave instantly, it's like, how many games have we watched on stream? High level players just fumble their combo, just throw like very winnable situations, and it happens so often, So obviously factor in time. That's the most important thing. But it's better to try and play out a losable game, provided that there's enough time, than it is to just scoop and assume your opponent is going to perfectly navigate the remaining cards on your field and attack you for game.
Searching, why did they search that card? If they search that card, what does it mean in terms of cards they can have in their hand?
Even Farfa misplays. If you play against Farfa, there even sometimes, very rarely, once in like a lunar eclipse, those are actually kind of frequent, actually. Never mind. Once in a generation, he'll make a mistake. So that's not a high. But shut the fuck up.
Single time they make a decision or an action in a game, you should be able to try to pick up on the hidden information that you're getting from such action, right? It should never be like, unless people are irrational. We're assuming these people are all rational people, which means they do things for a reason, which means you should try to understand what that reason is, and being able to sit down, figure that out will really help you in the long run and improve at the game. So every time
these are the types of videos, by the way, that are very good at hearing generically, but this would do so well from like real examples, And I think that's where Out of Characters videos are like so good. It takes like real game states and matchups and says, this happened because this happened, that happened because, and then you just learn a lot just by watching that,
Play against my opponent, I always question, why did my opponent do this in this order? Like, why did my opponent activate this card in draw phase? Like, why did they activate Q2 in synchro in draw phase? Why didn't they wait till main phase 1? Is it just because of draw? Is there another reason? Try to like basically just trying to understand. And then at the same time, you also think about what kind of information you're giving away by playing your card in a certain way, right? So, sometimes it makes more sense to intentionally play your hand in a way which maybe makes your hand seem weak, so your opponent is forced to hand trap it, so that in the hopes that you pass, but in reality, you already have the extender, right? But you wanted to bait the hand trap of your opponent's hand, so it's better to commit like the card to make it seem like you're a little bit weaker, right? That's a third piece. The second piece is like technical play. So I think this one is honestly the main reason or the biggest gap between the good players and like the people who are trying to get better. Technical play is basically about making the correct decision in the moment, in the heat of the moment, right? With limited time, right? So it's not about making the correct play. It's about making the correct play with limited time. Because in theory, if you have unlimited time, you can sit there and figure the play out. But in tournament setting, quite frankly, you don't have unlimited time. You're going to have to figure the thing on the spot, right? So sequencing the right plays, using the correct resources, organizing your chain in the right way, not giving your opponent information or opportunities that they shouldn't have, recognizing when you have multiple lines and choosing the one that basically gives you the best chance is going to be what technical play is all about, right? So one of the most common technical errors I see is people just autopilot their combos. They do like the one card combo every single time, which is fine. But sometimes.
Why am I in this video? What? Yo, just at me next. Why am I in this video? What's the quote? I learn one combo, I don't play around hand traps, and if my opponent has a response, I explode.
Times. And this happens because you probably done this combos 1,000 times already, so you're just gonna run through it on autopilot. It's kind of like maybe you should consider pivoting if your opponent, I guess, gives you a little bit more information about their hand, right? It's about that hidden information I was kind of talking about number 3, which is like, maybe because my opponent hand trapped in such a weird way, it could be possible they have this one other hand trap. Maybe I should be thinking about it. Or like, let's say I'm playing into a sky.
If you're bored enough or dedicated enough, you can literally just set up situations where you practice that. You can look at a deck that just has like standard starter extender, okay? I've got Spoon and Lacrima in my hand. I activate Spoon, my opponent chains Ash, so I can chain Lacrima and summon Zero. Where do I go from there? I suppose technically that's not a good example because it's the exact same combo. But you could actually just sit and like take like 3 cards out of your deck, pretend your opponent has Ash, and then just play it out and see like, you know, how that unfolds. You could practice that. Real life situations that way. But I don't think anyone really tests that way because it's better to just play full matches at that point, really. But there's so much to be learned from playing in a real game, in a real match, versus another person. And just playing like open-handed and talking to each other. Like just one session at locals with you and a friend, just playing with your hands face up and just discussing the right move at any one time. You learn so much.
Sky Striker.
In
My
just
opponent
one
decided
session than you would just like
to use
random
Widow
matches.
Anchor and take. That could mean
What
that they
friends?
haven't. It doesn't
Well,
necessarily eliminate the fact that they don't have another Widow Anchor. It means that they
Make a
could have
friend
a
of
drop
Bully
list to
Book.
sack the monster away so that they can use their other Widow Anchor, right? So it's like, okay, well, if I think they have droplets, how should I play my hand out in response to the card they have? A lot of people do make the right reads, but they're not playing the hand in a way in response to the read that they're making, right? So I think that's like one of the skills, right? And this also applies to like how you play on your opponent's turn too. So like how are you using your hand traps? Like, you know, are you using it at the right time? You're using it a little bit too early. So technical play is not about how well you go first as well. It's also about how well you go second and using those hand traps. At the same time, if you're playing board breakers, it's like, okay, well, how should I sequence my board breakers, right? In a way that it makes the most sense. And last but not least, I think the best and number one way to improve, and this is how I got a lot better, is to basically watch your replays, use your replays, and your testing sessions.
Yeah, I guess that
intention.
comes
So
under
what I mean
the
by this
last one,
is,
One thing I noticed, like, anytime I'm watching a YCS or watching people play, it is so much easier to see the correct play than having to sit and play it out yourself. It's impressive, honestly. Not to encourage backseating and Twitch chatting, but watching back your games, and this is in every game, by the way. Card games, FPS games, RPGs, everything. If you just watch yourself play, you notice how many mistakes you make, and you can try and learn and improve that, and you know, it's really important. Oh my god, dude, I haven't seen you in like 4 years. Holy shit. Dude, I think I tried to DM you on Twitch, by the way. This is like an OG, old school ass Farfa viewer. I haven't seen you in the chat in ages because I think you quit the game. Hi, sorry, this is very random. Hi, hope you're doing well. Dude, what the fuck? I swear, this guy's been watching my streams for like probably a decade or something. That's crazy. Dude, when I remember and recognize some of you in the chat. Genuinely, that's insane.
You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not internalizing it through your
yeah.
reps and correcting your mistakes over time, then you're not really going to get better, right? And a lot of people are actually leaving their potential on the table because they're basically playing games, but they're kind of mindlessly just churning games in without actually constantly thinking about, okay, I lost this game because of X, Y, and Z. I could have done this. I think that would have been a lot better. Analyzing their games back and thinking about, okay, what they could have done, right? And if you think about replays, a lot of people just don't watch them at all, or they watch them once, they cringe at the misplay they made and it's kind of just move on. But that's not really how you get better. When you go back on a replay, you need to be asking yourself specific questions, right? Like,
that's me like watching my streams. Like, far from misplays, cringe, leave.
where did I actually lose this game? Like, where did it fall apart? What was the actual turning point? Was there a line I missed? Did my opponent do something that gave me information that I should have picked up on? Did my opponent do something that did not make sense for my opponent to have this card? So why was I playing around it? Was there a moment that I was playing scared
That's what I'm
instead of
talking
making the
about.
right
They're
play? And the goal isn't to feel
98
bad about
months
making
up.
these mistakes, but it's to identify a thing that you can do differently next time, and that's going to constantly compound over and over again until eventually you just kind of like second nature do the better play, right? And yeah, and I think that's going to be one of the key top 5 ways I think you can actually improve at the game. Now, everything I covered in this video is kind of like the overview. If you guys want the full detailed breakdown of these 5 areas plus more, I wrote a complete guide on Metafy called Improving Your Yugioh Fundamentals, which I think is basically a compilation of things which I knew when I was trying to go from a beginner to an intermediate to a pro within Yu-Gi-Oh! that I wish.
Okay, it was a good video. But again, very surface level in explaining a lot of these things. This is where like genuinely like the video essay approach of YouTube with the whole like real life breakdown of like an actual turn would go so hard, you know? More of that would be really, really cool. But yeah, shout outs to Pac. Go subscribe. And listen, he's not one of like the top, like literal one of the statistically top users of MetaFi. He's in high demand. He's got good content.